I never thought the worst storm of my life would come wearing polished boots and standing perfectly still for 6 straight hours in the dark. Sunday, March 9th, 2025. The redbuds had just cracked open along the fence line like little purple hearts bursting against the cedar posts, and the hill country smelled like warm earth waking up after a long winter nap. Margaret had pulled a brutal 12 the night before. A 16-year-old rolled in with 3 rounds in the chest from a drive-by on East Riverside. She couldn't stop the bleeding. She came home at 7:17 a.m. with that boy's blood still under her fingernails and the kind of hollow look in her eyes that no amount of coffee or sleep can ever wash out. She kissed me once, soft on the corner of the mouth like I was the one who needed comforting, whispered, "I'm okay, Tom," even though we both knew she was lying to keep me from falling apart, and collapsed into bed still wearing her blood-speckled scrubs. I pulled her shoes off, tucked the quilt our oldest daughter made for our 30th anniversary around her shoulders, and left her to sleep the kind of sleep that comes after you've held a kid's heart in your hands and felt it stop. I made coffee. Cat's dark roast from the little red tin we buy on South Congress every time one of us has to go downtown for something we don't want to do. I ground it coarse the way my daddy taught me when I was 12 and thought coffee was just hot brown water grown-ups drank to stay cranky. The kitchen filled with that smell that usually means the world is still on its axis. I carried the first real mug of the day out to the porch in my socks, planning to sit in the rocker my granddaddy built in 1953 out of cedar. He cut himself, watch the Cardinals fight over the feeder like they do every spring, and pretend for 5 whole minutes that the last 6 weeks had just been a bad dream I could wake up from. That was when I saw them. 2 men at the cattle gate. Black uniforms pressed, so sharp the creases looked like they could cut glass. Silver badges catching the low sun like warning flares. Boots planted wide, hands loose at their sides, radios clipped high on their shoulders, faces blank as fresh sheetrock. They had been there since 3:02 a.m. I know because the floodlight snapped on at 3:02 and never went off again. I had checked the app at 3:03, 3:47, 4:12, 5:29, 6:11, 6:47, 7:03, and again at 7:16 when I finally gave up pretending to sleep and sat in the dark living room with the .38 across my knees, safety off. Heart knocking so hard I could feel it in my teeth and in the fillings the army dentist put in back in '89 when I was 22 and thought I was immortal. I stood on the porch with the coffee going cold and felt something shift inside me, something ancient and terrible. Not panic. Something colder. Recognition. The same feeling I had the first time I held my newborn daughter in 1994 and realized the world had just become infinitely more dangerous because now there was something in it I would kill or die to protect without a second thought. The same feeling I had when my daddy's heart quit in the barn and I did CPR on him until the ambulance got there 23 minutes later and the paramedics pulled me off because rigor had already started to set in. The same feeling I had the night Margaret miscarried the first time and I carried her to the truck at 2 in the morning while she bled through the seat and cried so hard I thought her heart would break before we ever got to the hospital. The same feeling I had the second miscarriage when we didn't even make it to the truck and I held her on the bathroom floor until the bleeding stopped and the silence that came after was worse than any screaming. My name is Tom Harrison. I am 58 years old. I have hung drywall in 110-degree attics, rebuilt barns after straight-line winds, buried both my parents in the little cemetery behind Georgetown First Baptist, held Margaret's hand through 2 miscarriages before God finally gave us our girls, sat up all night with a .30-30 across my lap the week the coyotes got bold enough to come into the yard after the chickens, and stood over my daddy's grave promising him I would never let anybody take what was ours. I have never run from a fight in my life, but I have also never started one. Margaret and I bought this place in 2013 after the kids flew the nest and Austin started feeling like a collar 2 sizes too tight. 5 acres of century-old pecan orchard, a 1940s limestone house with 12-foot ceilings and a porch wide enough to dance on, and a survey that put us 5 full lots outside the Willow Creek Estates HOA boundary line. I walked every corner post with the county surveyor, boots sinking in red clay, sweat stinging my eyes, telling Margaret this would be the last piece of ground we ever had to defend. 2 years earlier, a woman named Evelyn Whitaker decided she wanted 6 feet of my back fence line for a walking trail nobody asked for, nobody wanted, and nobody would ever use. She forged plats, filed fraudulent liens, and stood in front of Judge Benavides with a smile so thin it could slice bread. The judge saw through her in 8 minutes flat. He ordered the HOA to pay my attorney fees, my court costs, and warned Evelyn on the record that the next forgery would be a felony. She never blinked. She gathered her manila folders, smoothed her navy skirt, and walked out like the courtroom was just a speed bump on her way to something bigger. I told myself that cold little smile was the last I would ever see of Evelyn Whitaker. I was wrong. It started the way termites start, one tiny hole you don't notice until the floor falls in. Margaret came home the first week of February with someone else's blood dried on her shoes and her eyes too wide for the soft kitchen light. She stood in the doorway holding her bag like it weighed 1,000 pounds and said, "Tom, somebody was out by the gate again." Her voice cracked on the last word like ice on a stock tank in January. I tried to laugh it off. "Coyote, baby. They've been thick this year." She gave me the look she saves for drunks who swear they're fine to drive. Coyotes don't smoke Marlboro Reds, Tom. And they don't stand on 2 legs for 45 minutes breathing slow like they're counting your pulse. I checked the cameras. At 2:47 a.m., the floodlight flared and caught a silhouette behind the biggest pecan. No face. No movement. Just a dark shape patient enough to make my skin crawl off my bones. I told myself it was nothing. I told Margaret the same lie the next morning when she found boot prints pressed so deep into the gravel you could read the Goodyear welt clear as day. I told myself again when she came home shaking because she had heard breathing on the other side of the gate, slow, deliberate, close enough that the cold metal carried the sound like a drum. Then the first note appeared, wedged into the gate seam like a splinter driven deep. Plain white envelope, no stamp, 3 words in black ink. This isn't over. I carried it inside and laid it on the kitchen table between us. Margaret stared at it for a long time, then looked up at me with eyes that had seen too many people die on her table. "Tom," she whispered, "I'm scared." That was the first time in 31 years of marriage she had ever said those words to me. Something inside my chest cracked wide open and spilled ice water straight to my boots. I should have called the sheriff right then. Pride, fear, and plain old Central Texas stubbornness kept the phone in my hand and the words locked behind my teeth. The second note came a week later. "We remember." Margaret stopped sleeping. I started sleeping with the .38 on the nightstand and one eye open. The pecan trees that had shaded every family barbecue, every Christmas morning with the grandkids chasing fireflies, every quiet beer on the porch with Margaret's head on my shoulder, those trees stopped feeling like shelter and started feeling like hiding places for something that wanted us gone. I found myself jumping at every shadow, measuring every footstep on the gravel, listening for breathing that wasn't there. I hated it. I hated how small it made me feel in my own house, like I was shrinking inside my own skin. Then came the fake boundary realignment packet, for glossy pages with the HOA logo delivered to every mailbox on the street except ours. The new map swallowed my 5 acres whole and shaded it gray like a bullseye. Harold Jenkins, the treasurer who resigned for health reasons last year, slipped a handwritten note into Mrs. Henderson's copy 2 doors down. "I'm sorry you're caught in this again. Get a lawyer. Burn this after reading." Harold showed up at my door 3 nights later looking like death warmed over. His hands shook so hard he could barely pass me the flash drive. "Don't open this on your home Wi-Fi," he whispered, eyes darting to the dark like he expected Evelyn to step out of the trees with that same razor smile. "And Tom, I'm sorry. I was a coward. I let her scare me quiet." He was gone before I could offer him coffee or tell him I understood fear better than I wanted to. That night, Margaret and I sat at the kitchen table with her laptop running on a cellular hotspot and open files that turned my stomach inside out. A 43-page Word document titled Resolution Strategy, Harrison, T&M. 4 phases spelled out like a military campaign. Phase 1, administrative harassment, forged violations, fines, liens. Phase 2, social erosion, anonymous letters to neighbors about safety risks from non-compliant resident. Phase 3, vulnerability mapping, Margaret's exact shift schedule highlighted in yellow, my morning routine logged down to the minute. Phase 4, third-party correction, off-book, no badges, no paper trail, non-lethal but memorable. There were audio files. Evelyn's voice, cool and precise as winter rain. "He humiliated me in open court. He cost us $230,000. He needs to learn some debts aren't settled by judges." Another clip, quieter, recorded inside a parked car. "His wife leaves at 6:45 sharp every shift night. He walks to the gate between 8:55 and 9:20 most mornings to get the paper or let the dog out. That's the window. Make him remember me." I sat there until the sun came up listening to a woman plan my breaking like she was scheduling a dentist appointment. Margaret cried without sound, shoulders shaking, tears hitting the tabletop one by one until the wood was dark with them. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. "She wrote down when I leave for work, Tom. She wrote down when I'm not here to protect you." I couldn't answer. Rage and fear had tangled up so tight in my throat I couldn't tell which was choking me. And then Sunday came. I walked out with my coffee thinking I would run off whatever solicitor had lost his mind. Instead, I found Barrett and Leon standing there like statues carved out of every nightmare I'd had for weeks. Barrett handed me the red wax envelope. Inside was the demand for a written apology and $7,500 in emotional restitution. I laughed. It came out ugly and broken. "Tell Evelyn she can take her apology and her blood money in." The first blow caught me behind the ear, a professional sap that turned the world white. The second cracked across my jaw before the ground rushed up to kiss me. I curled instinctively, arms over my head, and felt boots find my ribs like they had practiced on a heavy bag. I heard Margaret scream my name from the porch, high and broken, the sound a man should never have to hear from the woman he loves. I heard Evelyn's voice drift down from the radio. "Calm as Sunday school. That's enough. Leave him breathing so he can sign." Then tires on gravel and nothing. I woke up tasting blood and diesel. The sky above the pecan trees looked too blue, too innocent for what had just happened. Margaret was on her knees beside me, face white as the envelope, hands red with my blood, saying my name over and over like if she stopped I might slip away. For cracked ribs, a grade 3 concussion, a bruised kidney, and a brand new understanding that some people will pay strangers to break you for the crime of saying no. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and old fear. Margaret never left my side. She held my hand so hard, I still have faint bruises on my knuckles 6 months later. When the narcotics wore off enough for me to think straight, she leaned close and whispered, "They knew when I wasn't here, Tom. They waited until you were alone." That was when the rage finally burned hotter than the pain. The sheriff took one look at the footage and said, "Mr. Harrison, you just won the lottery of righteous lawsuits. Barrett and Leon were in custody by nightfall. Their company was a ghost registered to a dead man. The money came from an HOA account Evelyn still controlled through a proxy. The newspaper story broke Tuesday. By Wednesday, 3 board members resigned. By Friday, the accounts were frozen, $500,000 missing, and the HOA filed for bankruptcy. People I hadn't spoken to in years started leaving casseroles and handwritten apologies on the porch. Harold came back at 2 a.m. A week later carrying a heavier envelope and looking like a man walking to his own funeral. Inside was the motherlode, spreadsheets of embezzled money, audio of Evelyn threatening widows over fake assessments, and the complete Phase 4 folder with 3 separate quotes for non-lethal correction services, each more expensive than the last. We handed everything to Detective Morales the next morning. He watched the files without blinking, then looked up and said, "This just went federal." Evelyn ran. She made it to the Chicago suburbs and started the same game on elderly widows with fake insurance policies. She was still using the same Gmail pattern she'd had since 2009. Arrogance is a hell of a fingerprint. Chicago PD arrested her in a Starbucks parking lot counting cash in $20 bills. She fought extradition for 3 months and lost. Between state and federal charges, she'll be 86 before she breathes free air again. 6 months later, Margaret and I smoked 5 briskets and opened the gate wide. We didn't send invitations. We just told folks to bring a lawn chair and an appetite. Half the old HOA showed up, kids running wild through the yard, dogs barking, coolers full of Shinerbach and sweet tea. Someone hung a hand-carved cedar sign on the gatepost that reads, "This property is defended by its owner and watched over by its neighbors." I still walk the fence line some mornings, coffee in one hand, Margaret's fingers laced through mine with the other. The gravel stays quiet at 3 a.m. The cameras still roll, but now they mostly catch raccoons fighting over pecan hulls and teenagers sneaking first kisses under the trees. Some fights end with gavels and prison bars. The best ones end exactly like this. Mesquite smoke curling through the leaves, Margaret's head on my shoulder, the sound of neighbors laughing loud enough to drown out every shadow that ever tried to own us, and the deep, steady knowledge that when good people finally decide they've had enough, they can move the whole damn world. Evelyn Whitaker learned the hard way that some pieces of Texas dirt come with a man attached who will not bend, will not break, and will not forget. Now the only thing that ever stands at my gate is that cedar sign, the morning paper, and the quiet certainty that the storm has passed and the ground beneath my boots is still mine. That is the entire story, every raw, bruised, bleeding minute of it. I still feel those boots in my ribs when the weather changes. I still wake up some nights reaching for the .38 that isn't there anymore. But I also wake up to Margaret breathing soft beside me, to sunlight filtering through pecan leaves, to neighbors who wave and call out, "Morning, Tom," instead of looking away. I'd love to hear where you draw the line. When does fear turn into fuel? When is it right to fight? And when is it wiser to wait? Have you ever had to stand your ground when someone decided your no wasn't good enough? Drop your story below. No judgment, just real people talking about the moments that define us. Every voice matters.